The roar of the motorcycle engine was the only warning. It was a normal Monday evening in Bogotá, Colombia, April 30th, 1984. The streets were busy. People were heading home from work. Inside his white Mercedes-Benz, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was exhausted. He was the Minister of Justice. It was one of the toughest jobs in the country. He knew he had enemies, many enemies. He knew they wanted him dead. He sat in the back seat. His driver was at the wheel. Another bodyguard sat in the front passenger seat. Outside, a second car followed close behind with more guards. Suddenly, a Yamaha motorcycle sped up from behind. It moved smoothly through the heavy traffic. 2 men were on it. The passenger on the back was young. He was a sicario, a hitman. He reached under his jacket. He pulled out a submachine gun, a lethal Uzi. The motorcycle pulled up alongside the right rear window of the Mercedes, the side where Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was sitting. Pop, 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 pop. The sound was like fireworks, but it was not a celebration. It was an execution. 7 bullets tore through the metal and glass. They all hit the minister. He didn't have time to scream. He didn't have time to dodge. The Mercedes swerved. The bodyguards in the chase car opened fire. The motorcycle driver tried to speed away. He lost control. The bike skidded across the wet asphalt. Both men flew off. One died instantly. He was the shooter. The other, the driver, tried to run. The police caught him minutes later. He was terrified. He was just a kid, a poor kid paid to kill the most powerful lawman in the country. Inside the Mercedes, silence replaced the gunfire. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla lay slumped over. The seat was soaked in blood. The Minister of Justice was dead. The entire nation was about to explode. This was not just a murder, it was a declaration of war. War by a criminal organization against the government, against the people. But this didn't start here. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to a time when Colombia was changing. A dark force was rising from the streets of Medellin, a force called the Medellín Cartel, and at its head was a man with a massive ego and unlimited greed, Pablo Escobar. In the early 1980s, Pablo Escobar was a shadow. He was a ghost. Everyone knew about the drugs flooding the streets of Miami and New York. Everyone knew about the violence, but nobody wanted to say his name. People were too afraid. Fear was Pablo's greatest weapon. Pablo was rich, richer than anyone could imagine. He owned private zoos. He owned palaces. He had thousands of people on his payroll, from poor kids in the slums to police officers, judges, and politicians. His power was invisible, but it was absolute. But greed was not enough for Pablo. He had a problem. He had an ego that could not be satisfied. He wanted respect. He wanted power. He wanted to be untouchable. He didn't just want to be the king of cocaine. He wanted to be the president of Colombia. It sounded crazy, but with his money, nothing seemed impossible. Pablo began his public campaign. He called it Medellin without slums. He built thousands of houses for poor families. He built soccer fields for kids. The poor people loved him. They called him Robin Hood. They saw a man who shared his wealth. They didn't ask where that wealth came from. They didn't want to know. Pablo was buying their loyalty. He was building a shield of people to protect him. Greed was like a virus in the city. Everyone wanted a piece of Pablo's money. The risk seemed worth it. Nobody could stop him. He felt untouchable.
Then, a new voice appeared in Colombian politics. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was a lawyer, he was a politician, and he was a man of morals. He saw the rot spreading through his country. He saw how the drug cartels were buying the soul of the nation. He decided to fight back. Lara Bonilla was chosen as the Minister of Justice. It was a dangerous job, a very dangerous job. Most people who took that job kept their heads down. They made deals with the cartels. They stayed quiet to stay alive. But Lara Bonilla was different. He was calm, he was confident, and he was controlled. He was not afraid. Lara Bonilla spoke the truth. He said what nobody else dared to say. He said that the cocaine cartels were a threat to democracy. He said they were a threat to the state. And he said that the man at the top of it all, the so-called Robin Hood, was nothing more than a criminal.
This was a new kind of power, the power of truth. Lara Bonilla was standing up to the ultimate power of greed and violence, and he was doing it alone. He started pushing for laws to fight the cartels. His favorite weapon was extradition. He wanted a law that would allow Colombian drug lords to be sent to the United States to stand trial. Pablo Escobar hated this idea. He knew he could buy a Colombian judge, he could terrify a Colombian jury, but he could not buy the U.S. government. He famously said, "I prefer a grave in Colombia to a cell in the United States." Extradition was a knife at Pablo's throat, and Lara Bonilla was holding it. He knew this could destroy everything. Pablo's ego could not handle this threat. A war was starting, a psychological war. Lara Bonilla versus Pablo Escobar, and it was only going to get louder. Pablo decided to fight back using the same system that was hunting him. He used his money to buy a place in the Colombian Congress. He ran as an alternative representative for a small political party. He spent millions. He bought votes. He bribed officials. In 1982, Pablo Escobar won. He was now a congressman. He had political immunity. He could not be arrested. The shadow had stepped into the light. Pablo thought he was untouchable. His ego had reached the peak. The king of cocaine was now a king of Colombia. Pablo wore a tie. He sat in the Congress building in Bogota. He smiled at the cameras. He was a public figure, a man of respect, a man who built houses for the poor. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what was coming. Lara Bonilla was watching. He saw this as the ultimate insult. A drug trafficker, a man with a private zoo and thousands of bodies on his scorecard, was now making the laws of the country. This was betrayal. The political system was betraying its own people. Before we go deeper, make sure you're subscribed. We post stories like this every single day. Lara Bonilla would not be silent. He stood up in the Congress building. He looked at Pablo Escobar, and he spoke.
Lara Bonilla didn't just accuse Pablo, he provided evidence. He showed documentation that Pablo's wealth was not from business, it was from the cocaine trade. He exposed the shield of loyalty. He revealed the true face behind the Robin Hood mask. He called Pablo Escobar what he truly was, a narco-terrorist. The risk was insane. The entire Congress was in shock. Some were afraid, others were angry, but they could not ignore the evidence. The process began. Pablo was stripped of his political immunity. He was kicked out of Congress. The dream of being president was over. His ego had been crushed. Pablo was furious. His isolation pressed against him. He was a criminal again, a billionaire hiding in the shadows. He had lost his public respect. He had lost his political shield, and he blamed only one man, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. The pressure inside Pablo's head was intense. He wanted revenge. He wanted Lara Bonilla to suffer. He wanted to show the world that nobody, not even the Minister of Justice, could humiliate Pablo Escobar and live. Pablo's world was about power, and power in his world was simple: plata or plomo, money or a bullet, silver or lead. Lara Bonilla had refused the money. Now it was time for the lead. The decision was sealed. It was not confrontation, it was recalibration. Pablo wanted to send a message, not just to Lara Bonilla, but to the entire country. He wanted everyone to know the consequences of standing up to him. He was not a businessman. He was a monster. He gave the order, and that was the moment everything began to crack. The order was simple: Lara Bonilla must die. No panic, no shouting, just another quiet departure. The hit was assigned to the cartel's specialized operational wing. They didn't go to normal hitmen. They recruited young kids, sicarios. These were poor kids from the slums of Medellin, kids with no future, kids who saw Pablo as a god. They were given a simple job, a motorcycle, and a lot of money. The cartel knew that a teenager with nothing to lose was more dangerous than an army. The sicarios were trained for weeks. They studied the patterns. They mapped the carefully planned routes that Lara Bonilla took. They knew his safe houses. They knew his security rotated. They knew the window that never closed. They believed they were waiting for the right moment. But uncertainty is information. Lara Bonilla knew the risk. Isolation pressed against him. Raids intensified. Communications compromised. His circle grew smaller. Meetings shorter. Rooms darker. The pressure had been building for months. He said nothing publicly, but he knew time was narrow. Time narrows options more effectively than enemies do.
He slept lightly, a bag always half-packed, shoes positioned near the bed. He changed his routines. He rotated his vehicles constantly. He used armored cars. He had a small army of bodyguards. He believed distance meant longevity, but departure ends control. Control requires presence. To leave his role or his city would signal weakness. He understood something his closest allies did not. Escape is not always survival. Sometimes it is surrender disguised as strategy. He chose to stay and fight. This was not confrontation. It was recalibration. His inner circle disagreed. Safe houses mapped, false leads planted, checkpoints bribed, false leads planted, safe houses mapped, drivers selected. It was all done out of loyalty, out of fear, out of desperation. The twist was not rage, it was exposure. The cartel engineers who worked with him for a long time on top-secret Soviet projects had designed a highly controversial and intense strategy for the ultimate crime scene, a highly optimized cinematic crime scene to seal his fate quietly and without noise. Out of noise, but into legend. The intelligence leaking through the cracks of loyalty. The young technical operator on Pablo's own payroll had been told to be calm, composed, and dangerous. He rerouted shipments, he redirected financial assets, quietly, without a bullet fired. No blood, no explosions, just data. He believed he was invisible. He was wrong. Fear listens, and Pablo Escobar understood information the way others understood bullets. History never distinctions between the two. The rain that night had already tested step-by-step points of vulnerability. The very rule the government used to find him, they assumed he did not know. Power is not pride, it is calculation.
Leaving Medellin entirely changed everything. Staying kept the myth intact. A bag always half-packed. The risk was too high. Escape promises safety, but safety sometimes weakens influence. This decision would seal more than one fate, and perhaps that is the final lesson. The day came, April 30th, 1984. Pablo sit in a dimly lit room miles away, isolated. He did not issue immediate punishment. He waited for confirmation. He described the route step by step. He identified 3 points of vulnerability. They were waiting, he said quietly, not accusing, just stating. He understood something critical. Departure ends control, and control was the one thing he never relinquished willingly. He was not sentimental, calculating. He wanted proof, confirmation, not suspicion. This was not confrontation, it was exposure, and exposure wounded more than any external threat. His ego needed to preserve authority. Power built on fear can survive fire, but it cannot survive time. Iron and time. Iron and time. He intercepted his own escape to preserve authority. One act prioritized life, the other prioritized control. Irony lingered. They tried to smuggle him out. This decision sealed more than one fate.
Back to the motorcycles, back to the final curve, back to the street in Bogotá. The figure step out, umbrella in one hand, calmness tightening, confusion tightening his jaw. Who authorized this? The other man swallows, confused. We were trying to help. And then pop, pop, pop. 7 bullets. Pop. And then silence hung heavy. No sirens, just the sound of rain and breathing. He intercepted his own strategy to preserve authority. Control requires presence, even when presence invites danger. This decision sealed more than one fate. The irony lingered. They tried to protect him, but he refused relocation, not out of pride, calculation. This decided which mattered more. The immediate consequence of Rodrigo Lara Bonilla's assassination was shock. Shock replaced the invisible power of fear. The nation woke up. The government realized they could no longer make deals. This was not politics. This was terrorism. Pablo Escobar had planned a highly dramatic and intense black and white crime scene, a cinematic true crime realism moment. No cartoon style, ultra-realistic, frozen seconds before something irreversible happens. He orchestrates the hit to preserve authority and show vulnerability. Confusion is a weapon. He had known. He intercepts his own escape route designed to save his life. 2 versions of the same man. One act prioritized life, the other prioritized authority. Irony settled permanently. Trust thinned. Allies acted independently, so routes changed again. Control thinned. Meetings smaller still. Trust thinned. His close allies disagreed, but he refused relational longevity. Isolation wrapped around him. Distance meant leverage. Isolation wrapped around him. The government declared war, but this decided which mattered more. The outcome was a complete shift in power. The legal process began. Extradition papers were signed. A system of high explosives to clear narco land began. They treat the money as fuel. A war of terror began. But Gaviria, the presidential candidate, promised to end the narco terror and became strong. The very act designed to save his life sealed his fate. The people tired of the blood and voted for authority. The very act, priority authority, was the act that sealed his fate. In the end, power always comes with a price. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and follow the channel. We upload new videos every single day. And trust me, the next story is even more intense, more surprising, and something you definitely don't want to miss. I'll see you in the next one.